Welcome to Family Law Matters, the podcast presented by the Mealy Firm. Visit www.allfamilylaw.com or call 866-687-8561 to learn more. And now, here's your host.
Hey, thank you. Bill King here with the Mealy Firm, and we are back to talk about the impact of family law and finances. When we were here last, we talked a little bit about, division of property, premarital, postmarital, marital property, how that plays out, and really how all of that impacts your finances. And so I've got a great group here today. I'm going to let them go around the table and introduce themselves, and then we'll jump right into it, and we're going to keep talking about the impact of family law and finances.
I'm Jeff Wilson. I'm the Chief Financial Officer for the Mealy Firm.
My name is Courtney Bernard-rance. I am the managing attorney of our Cumming office.
My name is Terrell Lee. I am the client care coordinator for the Atlanta office and multiple other offices.
And I'm Joe Niehoff. I am with Clifton Larson Allen, and my role is Senior Wealth Advisor.
Perfect. Thank you. So one of the things that, or one of the questions that I always get when I'm sitting in a strategy session with a client is, how is this going to impact my finances? What is this going to do? And so we have to think about a myriad of things. And like I said, we talked about division of property last time. We can get into alimony, we can get into attorney's fees, but I kind of want to flip this on its head and kind of think about, instead of dividing a family, and how does that look? Are there ways in which we as attorneys can help the foundation of a family, the foundation of a marriage, and the continuation of that, and even, almost generational wealth? So one of the things that we also do is estate planning. And so what we want to talk to you about today a little bit is prenups, postnups, and estate planning, and talk about that foundation of a family. And so, Courtney, let me ask you this. How often, when you're going through these conversations with potential clients or clients, are you getting questions about prenups, postnups, estate planning?
Relatively often. I think specifically folks who are not necessarily looking to get divorced or separated. They just want to know their rights and perhaps how to protect those rights. And so one of the things that I will bring up is the possibility of doing a postnuptial agreement, obviously if they're married, but certainly if it's folks who are perhaps looking to get married, prenuptial agreement as well.
Yeah, absolutely. And then Terrell, I know you on the front end in sales, when you're getting calls in and things like that, is it kind of the same? Are you getting, kind of a degree, or how many people are when they call asking about those issues?
A lot of times I'm not getting that at all. And that's one of the things that I try to talk to people about when I do initially have that conversation with them, asking, did you have a prenup? Did you have a postnup? What made you get the prenup? What made you get the postnup? So for me, from the sales or client care coordinator perspective, I don't have many people ask about it, but I'm asking multiple people about it just because I want to know the depth of the situation.
Yeah, absolutely. And in those instances where we're not getting those questions, I mean, it's kind of incumbent upon us to educate clients or potential clients about that, right? So, yeah, we may be getting the question a decent amount, but boy, I'd love to get, especially for estate planning, I'd love to get that question every time. Hey, because it is staggering how many people don't have an estate plan in place, which is kind of scary. And so, like I said, it's kind of incumbent upon us to make sure that we're educating the public, educating our clients, educating our potential clients. Here are the options. Here's what we can give you. Here's what we can do for you to, like I said, create that generational wealth, or create that foundation upon which okay, I'm secure, my family's secure moving forward. So, sorry, Terrell, you were going to say something.
Yes, but also at the same time, just like you said, it's the education of. So when I'm asking these questions, a lot of times they don't have things in place. So that's when I speak about the foundational package, or, estate planning. What is your plan after the divorce?
Yeah. What
is your plan? What is your goal? What is the financial goal that you're trying to attain?
Yeah, absolutely.
Well, I'll jump in here and add a piece to this from my perspective, and to give the audience a little bit more of the background here. So Clifton Larson Allen is an accounting firm. Wealth advisory is a big part of what I do inside of that firm. And what I find in working with our clients is that more often than not, people don't even know, right? They're not even aware that they should be planning for their estate, regardless of their level of wealth, right? There's different stages in estate planning. If you ask somebody like me, right, it starts with the basics, sounds like the foundations, right, where it's, hey, I need a will. Something happens to me, I want my wife or my spouse or whoever to inherit my wealth that I've generated and hopefully to my kids there afterwards. And some of that can be very fundamental and basic and, for lack of a better term, inexpensive, right? And it doesn't have to be a lot of money. Like, you don't have to be worth $5, $10, $15 million in order for that to be something you need to discuss or work on.
Right.
But that estate planning becomes even more important and even more really complex as your level of wealth grows, to a point where if you're not prepared with the foundation first, and then you come to us at the back end and say, in the worst case scenario, it's hey, something didn't work out, we're now getting divorced. What does this look like? And we're worth $15 million. Well, that's a totally different ballgame. So just the education, similar to what you said, Terrell, is like that's the most important part. But also knowing that you don't have to be worth so much money in order to be able to get this planning and these conversations started.
Yeah, absolutely. So I go out and I do a lot of events and speak to people and talk to them about estate plans. And one of the things I tell them is, whether you have $4 or $4 million, you want to at least have something in place, right? And one of the reasons behind that is on the estate planning side, when you're thinking through, I don't have that much money, it's not really worth it to have a will. Well, that's not the case. As attorneys, sometimes we're thinking worst case scenario. What's the worst case scenario, right? And so if somebody passes away or they're killed in an accident and they have a wrongful death suit, now all of a sudden their estate may be worth millions because their estate has brought a suit on their behalf. And then now they've got millions in their estate with no plan in place. So even after death, it is very important to have these documents in place, because you just never know what's going to happen or how you could inherit or receive money, or your estate or something could have a claim that then generates money that needs to be divided amongst your heirs.
I guess the big question for me is, how do you spark that conversation before death?
Just going out and I would say, short of knocking on doors, just going out and trying to speak at events and network and communicate with people and just get the word out of, hey, this is important. This is what you need to do. And right. So, sometimes I'm out begging people, like, please, even if you don't come to us, like, go get something in place, because it is so incredibly important for your family after you pass away. You just. I can't overstate that enough.
Better to have it and not need it than to need it and not have it.
Oh, no doubt. And I think it's something that as you go through life, like, listen, you guys probably apply this in your own ways as well, but like me in finance and growing up in finance, it's not like I came from our family had a ton of money. Okay, so learning that was really impactful for me. But everything I learned, guess who the first people I went back to was? Mom, dad, brother, sister, friends, right? I mean, those are the people that I wanted to help because it's a part of my life, right? So when we're talking about building business, sales, people, how do we reach out, connect? I mean, you're right. It's about networking, but just networking internally with the people you know and love. And that's going to be a big impact to creating opportunity and at least educating the family that you have around you what's going on.
Right. Yeah. Bill or Courtney or Terrell, would you care to elaborate what a post-nuptial agreement is? Everybody's heard of a prenup. A lot of people have never heard of a post-nup. What is that? So
Post-nuptial agreement is pretty much very similar to a prenuptial agreement. It is an agreement that married people enter into after marriage. It can cover a range of subjects, division of property, alimony, attorney's fees. Pretty much the gamut in terms of issues of married people and how, if down the road, if there is a divorce, how they will dispose of those issues.
Yeah, and the great thing about those documents is you can actually have them play off of your estate plan. Mm-hmm. So you want those documents, a prenup or a postnup, to also correspond with the language that you include in an estate plan, whether it's a will or a trust. You want to make sure all of those documents match up. It's incredibly important that they do, because then you can inadvertently or I guess intentionally end up in litigation. Somebody bringing a claim when those documents don't don't exist in harmony.
Is it typically done as part of an estate plan? I'm just trying to imagine a situation where two people get married and 6 months later they're like, you know what, just in case this doesn't work out.
Yeah,
let's
if I
do
were
a
to bring that
post-nup.
up to my wife right now, hey, let's do a post-up, I don't think
Right.
Brittany wouldn't be very excited. So
On the other hand, if it's page 9 of an estate planning document, you might survive that conversation.
Right.
That's why people have never heard of it.
Yeah, no, they're separate. They are separate documents, and a prenup is just like a postnup. They run, under the same test. There's a case that we were trying to figure out a little earlier, but it's the sharer test. It's share v. share, and it lays out the requirements for whether or not a prenup is valid, and that also translates to a postnup, and that's how similar they are. Is they kind of run in the same, idea of this is what needs to happen in order for them to be valid. And the biggest things are, that we talk about, especially with clients, is full disclosures. And so when you're doing full disclosures in those documents, and this is also where estate planning can come into play off of that, is you can't have any fraud in terms of creating those documents. And that's where the full disclosures come in. And what I mean by that is husband and wife, if it's a postnuptial agreement, or fiance and fiance, if it's a prenuptial agreement, have to reveal to the other side their entire net worth, their debts,
Finances.
just their finances. They have to go, here's how much I make, here's how many properties I have, here's how many cars I have, here's a value for my sofas, my furniture, here's a value for my jewelry, for memorabilia, for collections, here's the debts that I have.
It is a thorough markup.
Yeah, and we go so far as I'm very, very particular about these, because in the back end, there's you're going to have people 3 years later, 10 years later, 25 years later, reviewing your work and going, did they do a good enough job to make this valid? So we try to do everything. And so in those documents, I also include 3 years of tax returns as an attached exhibit to be additionally secure in the notion that we have met this notion of you've got to have full disclosures in order to make this a valid document. So
I was going to add too, Jeff, maybe a reason why a postnup happens, right? And you guys could talk to this a little bit more in depth as well. But in my experience, when we've seen these for clients that we have estate plans that we build and so on for, what we typically find is it happens when let's say you had a business you started with a couple buddies that was nothing, right? You got married, but you had this business kind of on the back end. Maybe it was your side gig, whatever they call it nowadays. And that was what you kind of started, but it blew up. It became something much bigger than you anticipated. There might be some event, so to speak, that happens in somebody's life that says, okay, well, we didn't think about this before, but maybe this is something I need to have a postnup. We need to start talking about what that means, how it's separate from what we in a marital relationship have developed together. I want to have this separate. If something were to ever happen, I want to make sure it's documented, right? So I think that's more of the true reality of when these things come up. It's not, with malice in mind, but it's more of like, hey, there's something significant going on that may not have been a direct impact into our relationship.
yeah, the other reasons that I've seen it is, unfortunately, we're couples who have experienced, I say couples, one partner within a marriage has experienced being cheated on. Mm-hmm. So adultery. If adultery comes into play and the other side says, you know what, I love you, we've been together for 15 years, I understand you made a mistake. However, if we're going to move forward in our relationship, if we're going to go to counseling, I want to be secure in the fact that I know what's going to happen if this happens again or if we separate in the future. And so in that situation, I've seen couples come in and say, I want something in place because I'm really concerned this is going to happen again. I'm going to trust him again. We're going to go to counseling, but I want to be secure in the fact that if this happens again, I know that I'm not going to be put out on the street or something bad's going to happen.
So I'm curious about something, and I want to flip what Jeff said. So Jeff asks, a lot of times most people don't know what a postnuptial is, right? Even if you don't know it, and just like now, we just got introduced to what it may be for those who may not know what it is. How do you bring up a conversation regarding, again, it goes back to what we were originally talking about in regards to education educating your client on what is what. But how do you educate someone on having the conversation of, do I need a postnuptial or do I need a prenuptial, and start focus on that before the intent of marriage? Because I feel like that would be important. That plays an important factor, especially when you're even thinking about getting married. So that way, when you are married and you go through those different issues or possibilities of different issues, then at that point in time, things are kind of already settled or figured out.
It's hard to do that because a lot of people rush into marriage. I don't want to say a lot of people rush into marriage. I don't think that's the right term.
Young.
Yeah, you
Right,
marry
it's
young.
not something you're thinking
yeah,
about
it's
at
not. You're
22
not.
years
Yeah,
old.
it's a lot of. So I guess what I'm thinking through is most of the time when we see it, it's people who are on their second or third marriage. They've been through it and they want that education. And the reason that I paused right there is because I had this thought in mind. I was like, what if when you go to the probate court and you get your marriage license, before you're able to get that marriage license, you have to certify that you met with a divorce attorney or somebody who educated you on what happens if you get divorced.
That would be
I know that's
smart.
not a requirement, but that just popped into my
Maybe it
head
should
just now. And I was like, because that's why I paused and I was like, what if they had some sort of like verification that you met and understood what what the consequences are if you do get divorced before they will issue or verify your marriage license?
That would save a lot of marriages, I would think.
Listen, I got a question in here. Actually, anybody in here Catholic? Besides me.
Technically, but not.
Yeah, so to be married in the Catholic Church, that's actually something they do. You have to go through a process called pre-cana.
Pre-cana, yeah.
And pre-cana does that to a degree. Like, hey, listen, you're not only getting married. I know I just made this a religion conversation. Sorry, but you're getting married. Right? And there's a legal aspect to it, but there's also one in the church, and the church has these components that you have to get a annulment if you get divorced, and so on. So, no, I think that is unbelievably impactful. Right?
Yeah.
I mean, just the education and but it's a very mature move, right? And how many that first marriage is not always the most mature, right? It sometimes is more of an emotional, hey, I love you, I want to do this. And again, you might be
a lot of infatuation.
Yeah, I mean, you might be 22, 23, 24 years old, and it takes a very mature person to make that decision, but you get some sense.
But then you get somebody like me who's never been married at 36, hoping to get married one day.
Yeah, see, but you're super intelligent now. You got all this info.
Especially because you work for a family law
well,
firm.
Exactly. That was my next.
I was going to leave that out.
Next go-to.
Yeah, no, it has nothing to do with that. Right?
You are over-equipped.
Yeah. There you go.
I'm very prepared for that conversation.
So, talking through that, that popped up. I was like, what if they had this requirement? And that's, that's very true. A lot of churches, and especially in the Catholic religion, require that. I know one of the things that I went through before I got married personally was we did some marriage counseling. My wife and I did premarital counseling before we got married, and that was something that my father-in-law wanted us to do. And I will tell you, it's a lot of people are reactive instead of proactive in that situation. We see that a lot. And so being proactive and what I call tending the garden, right? You want to tend your garden. And so making sure you do that. And in those situations, I think that is where the opportunity presents itself to talk about some of these things. And so when people come in, there's this kind of stigma of, well, if I'm getting a prenup, I'm setting it up for failure, right? And so I'm assuming that my relationship or my marriage is going to fail. And I flip that on its head when I'm talking to potential clients. And I say, I wouldn't look at it like that. This is how I would look at it. I would look at it as creating the foundation upon which you are building your marriage, because you and your spouse, your partner, soon-to-be spouse, or your spouse, if it's a postnuptial agreement, will understand where both of you are in the relationship. You will understand what would happen if the relationship ended, and you will understand what each of your responsibilities are within the marriage. And so it is not a, oh my gosh, this is what happens if we divorce. This is we are secure in understanding each of our roles within this relationship, and we are going to be mature and understanding about that and set all of that out from the get-go to build a strong foundation. So that's how I present it to people who are asking those questions, because it's not, like I said, it's not a, oh my gosh, this is it. It's more of a, I understand what we need to do, and we're going to be stronger for it.
Does the postnuptial agreement trump the divorce proceedings? If you then end up in a divorce, does the judiciary pull out this postnuptial agreement and say, well, hey, this is easy. You signed off on this 6 years ago. Done.
Yeah, that's the hope. Yeah, absolutely. And so what you lay out, so I guess we can get a little technical,
Yeah.
Courtney, you and I, for just a second and kind of talk about so you touched on it briefly earlier, but in a prenuptial agreement or a postnuptial agreement, you can define separate property. You can define premarital property. You can define what marital property is. You can get very specific on what happens with alimony. You know, if we get a divorce and we're married for 5 years, this is how much alimony you're going to get. If we're married for 10 years, this is how much alimony you're going to get. So you can get very specific in those documents. And I have had
It's like a bonus plan.
Yeah.
yeah.
Have you vested yet?
Are you vested?
And so, you can get very technical in those documents about things, very specific details. And so when you were talking about a business, you can lay out this specific business, and this is what happened with the business. You can lay out this specific property, and this is what happens with that property. So it is, simply put, it's just a contract of this is how we're going to handle things if this event occurs. And that event is a divorce.
Well, let me ask you this. Can you make changes? Now, I know I'm not a lawyer, so I can't give any legal advice. So my question is, would you, just to have the question out there for other people who may want to know, can you make changes within the postnup?
So this is one thing that we learn in law school is you can contract in, you can contract out. You can amend your contract. And so, yes, you can take what was a prenuptial agreement and say you want to revisit it, but you're already married. That means you're going to be negotiating a postnuptial agreement. So you can revisit all of the terms that were in the prenuptial agreement and change it into what would then be a postnuptial agreement.
Can you sunset clause a prenup and a postnup?
Hey, there you go.
Can you? The reason I ask
would
this
imagine-
is I'm depreciating personally at about 20% per year. You know, so.
Hey, we got the sunset of the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act.
right.
I want to get very
Yeah,
specific
yeah.
here on taxes
I
and
would have-
estate planning.
I would imagine so. I don't know of any reason why you wouldn't be able to say, you know, if I reach age 60, that changes. Or if I reach age 65, that changes. I don't see any reason why not. I mean, as long as you are contracting and it's not a violation of the law and it doesn't go against public policy,
Right.
then I don't see any reason why not.
It's like if we're married for 25 years, you're fully vested.
That's right.
There you go.
Yeah.
So, I don't see any reason why that wouldn't be a possibility. Again, one of the things that I talk about with these documents, which I love, is that you can be so just like estate planning, you can be so general, and you can say everything to my wife, and then if not my wife, to my children. Same thing on the postnups and prenups. You can say if we get divorced, we're going to split everything 50-50, and this is everything's marital property. Even if we had it before, it could be that simple. Nobody would ever do that. The whole reason is to define premarital property and marital property, and most of the time they're limiting what's marital property, but you could be that general. Then you could go into it and be that specific. And so, like I said, one of the ones that I saw, years ago when I was doing a prenup was an alimony section, and it was like a federal pension almost, and it was taking like a high 3. It was like depending on what the other side's gross income was for the highest of their, you take the 2 average years of their highest gross income, and if they'd been married for 5 years, you would turn that into X amount of dollars. I mean, it was a very complicated formula trying to figure out what the alimony was going to be, but it was almost to the point of like a federal pension where you were working out what were so. Again, you could be as general or specific in those documents as you want.
Yeah. When you say nobody would ever do that, I feel like, well, that's a challenge. That's a challenge. I look at the cases as they go through, and I'm like, really, that can happen? I never thought that could happen, but it does.
Yeah. So on your side, Jeff. So Jeff, CFO with the firm, on your side, when people are coming in and you're talking about, I think where generally you may see it is when we're pricing out these things, right? And so the other side of it is, okay, we can talk to you about this is how much, excuse me, this is what this is how it can impact you, but on the other side, this is how much it's going to cost, and these are the things. So when we're looking at that, flat fees, retainers, you're dealing with that on that side a lot. And so what are you seeing in terms of cost, first of all, and then, case values, and then what people are, I think, spending on cases like these, because I think that'll give them a sense of, gosh, that's what a divorce could cost if it's highly litigated. And if you have these prenups and postnups in place, it's supposed to limit that litigation and make it more straightforward.
Right. I think what I see is a lot of misevaluations. It's the sticker shock of an immediate cost of $15,000 to $20,000 seems overwhelming. And, obviously the clients are under a lot of stress, but $15,000 to $20,000 compared to, the long-term grief, the long-term financial impact of staying in a bad situation. Basically, it takes it out of you. It takes it out of your soul far more than the cash that you could buy a not great car with. And I think that because it is cash, people, to use a term of art, they freak. And in reality, I feel like they should focus on being very thorough, very deliberate, getting the best counsel that they can get, and funding that case up front so that when the judiciary system moves, and we know the judiciary system is a case of hurry up and wait, but to have as much resource on deck to attack that problem, to deal with that problem when that moment comes. So unsurprisingly, as the CFO, I would advise people to mobilize cash and stack it up and use it for this purpose and never look back. Just never look back at it, because you're not going to miss that money in 5 years. You're going to miss your kids in 5 years if you don't have a good agreement. Money is not everything, and when it comes to something like this, I think the upfront costs of it are really not much on a scale. So now, having said that, Bill, I typically do not talk directly to the clients, but I hear those conversations, I hear that counsel, and I'm in the background cheering, because I absolutely know it's true, because I understand and see the problems that are caused when somebody has funded a case that's going to need $15,000 to $20,000 to go through the system correctly, and they short sheet it, and it's got 5, 7, 10 on it. And as you know, we're a big team, and when we get moving on a case, those retainers are consumed quickly because we get a lot of people on them simultaneously. And then it stops, and that's not a good thing. You have to go through this restart process. So I am not an attorney. I don't give legal advice, but if somebody corners me at a cocktail party, I say just stack it up. This is one thing you do not scrimp on. So,
you got real serious there, which I love. I'm going to say something that a couple friends always told me that have been divorced. So it's really expensive, but it was worth every penny, right? So you do have to spend the money to get what you need in those situations.
Yeah. And it's more merciful, I think. It's for everybody to get the process done, to get it done right, get it papered correctly instead of dragging it out.
Well, and there's situations, and I have people going through this that have connected even with the firm here that circumstances after the fact pop up that make it even more expensive because it wasn't done right the first time. Yeah. Even though you thought you had it all covered, you thought all the boxes were checked and all those things, it can just continually get worse and worse and worse if not really documented in the right way.
Right. And you guys, speaking of you, Billy, and you, Courtney, and you, Terrell, you're probably far more familiar with those family law cases, or it touches on family law and estate planning, where we get most of the way through a case and one of the parties passes away or becomes disabled without that estate planning in place. So you guys can describe what can happen there. That's a horror story.
Yeah, I mean we had a case recently where that happened, and I won't go into any real detail, but yes, we had a settlement agreement that was signed, and then somebody passed away in the case, and it was a heartbreaking case to work through, just because there were so many moving parts, and it added cost and it added delay, and then it caused friction between the client and surviving kids. And so those cases are in particular more devastating because of the added emotion and stress that go into it. I mean, obviously, you're in a divorce. In that situation, you have a marriage that is dying, and so there are people who will grieve the marriage and then they will move on. And but when you have somebody that passes away, sometimes that is very hard, much harder to move on from. And so to have that in combination and happen at the same time, or back to back, or very, very tough cases, especially if you don't have the right things in place, because the added stress of all of that with litigation is incredibly impactful on families.
Now that's very true, very, very true. But I am going to flip it really quickly just because I see it from a different side.
Yeah, no, please.
So I see people, and I talk to people on a day-to-day basis to where they tell me, look, I'm about to die, okay? I don't want them to have anything. How do I go about this? Or, I got cancer, they don't take care of me, and I'm going through all these issues, and I think they're just waiting for me to die. I get it from a different perspective, because a lot of times, yes, people want these divorces and relationships aren't lasting, but now I get into a spot to where death is on the table. They're just waiting for me to die to collect money. So I want to get out of this because of that. I was never really in love with them after 40 years, and that's the one that really gets me. It's like 40, 30 years, and I just get no hope. I'm like,
Yeah.
I haven't even made it a year, 6 months. I haven't even gotten married yet. You're saying 40 years and you're done now? So it's like I get those, and for me, I look at it as to why now? That's always my question. Why now? Why before? You already know you're in a weak spot within your health. Why wait till you feel like, well, now I feel like they're just using me? Because obviously you felt some type of way before, especially thinking about it before. So my question is, before that can happen, how do you teach somebody, and go back to that, educate someone on what is the right thing to do after so many years?
I think, do we need a psychologist in here? I could call my brother.
We might want to get that next time.
Yeah.
We might want to have somebody, just on standby.
Tough one right here.
It's interesting. I think Courtney, you would agree with me, and Terrell, I think you hit the nail on the head there. There are increasingly, more and more a wave of what I call gray divorces. There are a lot more divorces of people who are in their 70s, 80, I've had, a client, in upper 80s going through, several clients in their upper 80s going through this process. And so thinking through that, it is a mindset shift almost. And what I mean by that is, one of the things that we as attorneys in family law are accustomed to is litigation. We are in court more than most attorneys. And so when I am thinking about a client who is older and going through a process like this, one of the things that I think through is what, more so, because I always think through how is litigation going to impact that. But what I mean is, how is litigation going to impact them physically? Mm-hmm. Going into court and dealing with that, given their age, and how is that going to impact them physically? And so in those cases, we are hyper-focused on trying to get a settlement and utilizing that in the advice that we give. And so just like anything in what we do, it depends. And so it really just is a matter of understanding, situational awareness, understanding what's going on, understanding, this person might have this thought in mind, but educating them on the process, because they come in, they've been married for 40 or 50 years, they've never been through this process, they may have never stepped foot in a courtroom, they may have seen a courthouse once or twice, and watched TV and seen this is maybe what it's like, but it's not like that. And so being thoughtful about addressing those additional concerns, right? And I think that's something that is a focus of how we work with our clients, right? So we talk about a concierge level service where we think through everything, we work through everything. You are not a number that just walks in the door and we're gonna file your complaint. We're gonna serve discovery. We're gonna go to mediation, and then if you don't settle, we're gonna go to court, and we're going to try this case, and you're going to have to go sit on the stand for 4 hours, and we're going to question you about the last 50 years of your life. Not just doing that and taking a step back and thinking through, okay, if we file the complaint for divorce and we serve it, how is that going to impact you? How is that going to impact your spouse? I mean, one, thinking through that. And then two, exactly what we're here talking about today. How does that impact the documents that you have in place? Do you have a prenup or postnup? If they've been married for 40 or 50 years, I'm going to tell you right now, it is probably a 1 in a million chance that they have a prenup or a postnup in place. Mm-hmm. They are relatively, in my opinion, again, in my practice, in my experience, they are relatively new documents that are used more and more by younger couples and people who have seen and used and heard of these documents. It's just more prevalent now. Does that make sense?
So like they're in their 30s and not married yet. And
yeah, just like that. Just like that. Works for a family law firm and knows how to. Yeah, just like that. And so thinking through that, it's going to be very rare that somebody, again, I'm not going to say somebody that's in their 60s and 70s doesn't have it. But if they're in their 60s, 70s, or 80s and they've been married for 40 or 50 years, it's unlikely that they're going to have those documents in place. So then having the discussions with them about the estate planning, and which is one of the big reasons we have our foundational package attached to these cases where we say, hey, this is something you need to think through. So I know we're talking about the impact of family law on finances, but one of the other things to think through is if you step into the area of a divorce, you're in your 50s, 60s, 70s, 80s, you have done estate planning before, it is likely that your partner or your spouse is going to be your power of attorney. They're going to be your healthcare agent. I assure you, you do not want the person making the decisions on whether or not to pull the plug on you. You don't want that person to be the person that you're currently litigating a divorce against.
That's one of my big, in the position that I'm in and where I sit, when I speak to people about these foundational packages, because I have to sit here and listen to what has been going on throughout your entire marriage. Okay, I'm digging, asking all the questions, trying to figure out, well, why did this happen? Or why are you calling? Or why now? And, all these different things. And then as I sit there and think about everything they said, and when I talk about the contract and introduce the foundational package, more often than not, I get people to sign it because I'm divorcing this person. I don't want this person to have any legal rights or say so over anything that happens to me when it comes to my health. So I explain to people all the time when it comes to the foundational package and the power of attorney. You're upset with this person right now. You want to divorce them right now. But you don't want to sign the foundational package, which will allow you to give somebody else power of attorney, then allowing this person to have power of attorney. And if they so choose to, God forbid, pull the plug on you, that's just what it is. Mm-hmm. So when I explain it to people, a lot of people, I had a conversation today, and he was just like, I thought that was something different. Who do I get? That's on you who you decide to. He said, yeah, let me get that too. So it's like, again, and I'm always revert back to the education. A lot of people who've been married for 16, 17 years, they don't even know that much or that information, which is why, again, things like that concierge level service of letting them know information that they don't know, never knew, is so important.
Yeah, and I think to summarize this maybe a little bit, tell me if I'm off base here, but you likely, especially in those elderly situations, do a lot of coaching, right? It's like, hey, listen, your circumstance here is maybe a little different. Like we could go down this path. I imagine the last resort is court, right? That's like the
Yes.
last place you want to be,
Always. Yeah.
right? So at the end of the day, like it's, hey, listen, let's get this, let's narrow in on some focus, but let me coach you on what you should expect, right? You guys have done this. You've been married for 50 years, 40 years, 30 years, whatever it's been. Like, hey, let's be real. Let's figure out some true common ground before we get to those points. And again, a lot of the financial components on my end when we're involved in those situations from a wealth or financial planning perspective, we do the same thing. We're coaching.
Yeah.
What is this asset versus that asset? How does it work? What if I'm 35, 45 getting divorced versus 60, 65 getting divorced? Well, that the impact of an IRA versus a cash account are different. So those are, I think, a lot of coaching through these situations is huge.
Yeah, and I'm glad, and I'm absolutely glad that you spoke up there, because that's a lot of where like our partnership with you comes into play. Is we're looking at it and going, okay, who are the experts that we can bring in to help coach this person? And, because a lot of those times it could be somebody they're 70 years old and they've never opened a bank account, or they've relied on their partner or their spouse to handle all that.
That's what I was just going to say. The other one was doing all that. So they get this lump sum of cash or money, and they're like, what
do I do
where
with
I
this?
go?
Right.
Like, how do I pull money out for income? Like,
Right.
what is that what it is?
Yeah,
Like, I don't.
exactly. And so that's where, partnering with somebody like you who can provide that financial guidance and help with that is huge. And so, it is. You're 100% right. It is a lot of coaching, a lot of hand holding, which we are absolutely happy to do. I mean, it's part of our job, right? Is to try to help them get through this process, to get to the other side, and understanding that, again, a marriage is dying, but to get to the other side in a better position than what they were in facing that, right? And so it is, I think, incumbent upon us to make sure that we are addressing all of those issues and understanding each individual client's situation and facing and addressing those, especially with older clients in those situations, trying to work through those issues. So, I mean, Courtney, I'm sure, I know you do the same exact thing when you have somebody that sits down across from you. You're trying to understand not just the legal impact, but like what's the life impact here?
Yeah, so I actually, as you guys were discussing this, I was literally thinking of the potential client that I had a strategy session with last week. They are going through it's a great divorce, going through a very difficult period of time with their partner. Partner has dementia. And so it's not just a matter of, we don't get along, I don't want to be with this person anymore. It's, this person is not the person that I married because of a mental health issue. And so and also on top of that, parties are just limited finances. So trying to coach potential client through making an offer, setting out their limited finances, just going over the overall picture of their finances, and kind of crafting a full settlement offer that hopefully the partner will accept, because again, they can, have this knockout, drag out fight in court, but they are of limited finances, and it just doesn't make sense to do that. So yeah, just coaching people in that type of situation on settlement and how that they're still investing in their future, and it's probably a better investment than a knockout, drag out fight in court.
Yeah. So as we wrap up here, I know we could talk about this a lot more, which we will, because this is part 2 of last time I said blank. I think we're going to have a few more segments on the impact of family law and finances. But as we wrap up here, do y'all have any kind of final thoughts on just anything that we've discussed today? So, but kind of centered around the kind of prenups, postnups, estate planning, creating, again, kind of a foundation in how those help impact finances.
I have a quick comment that something you said earlier, I think this is what you said. Your father-in-law made you guys go to marriage counseling? No, this is really important. Okay.
Kept that in your mind.
No,
this
I did.
entire
I've been
time.
wanting to
Man,
talk
you
about
really
this
you really
for a
held
long
on to
time.
that one.
Yep. And the reason why is, and you know very well, Billy, here that I have 4 daughters. Okay. So
yeah.
I'm forcing this. This is a thing. People do it. I'm gonna have you on
Yes.
speed dial.
Yes.
All right.
Yes.
Just in case.
I understanding. I was old fashioned. I went, spoke to my father-in-law.
that was very-
Said, great. I'd love to marry your daughter, and he
he's
said,
like,
"Here are my conditions."
Yeah, here you go. This is how it's gonna happen. Listen, I'm in on that game. 100%. 100% there. No, my little final thoughts though here is I think we'll probably all say a very similar thing. But first of all, thank you for having me. This was a lot of fun, and
Yeah, thanks for being here.
I enjoy doing this stuff when we can. But there are so many things that go into the financial components of a family, not just of a divorce or not just of these things, these significant circumstances. But it really just got to keep in mind that you don't have to do it by yourself. There are resources, and I say this to every single person I meet. You do not have to work with me, but work with somebody that understands investing, understands finances, even to a point where understands the way taxes work, right? Just have somebody in your corner as a resource to be there to help you through the different stages that you are all going to go through in life. 36 years old, getting married, and having 4 kids. Wait, is it 4? Is that the goal? No, I'm just kidding.
I mean, minimum at least 3.
Hey,
you know,
listen,
you got to have.
I got 4. You got to catch up. All right, Terrell, let's go.
So that mean you got a swimmer, you got a tennis, you got
Dude,
basketball.
All the athletes. Hey, my daughters both were the first overall draft pick in their basketball assessment the other. Proud dad. I had to put it on.
Number 1.
Is this live?
No, this is not
I'm
live.
just kidding. But no, seriously, like, you have to be prepared for all the things that are going to happen, and having those people in your corner are important. So
Absolutely.
One thing I would just kind of wrap up with, first and foremost, thank you for allowing me to be here. It was an absolute pleasure meeting new people and new faces and seeing faces I haven't seen before. But I would like to keep reiterating what I say in regards to education, but not just education on the aspect of post-nup and prenup, but education on, like you said, what that process looks like even before you have to come to it. So whether you got to go speak to a priest or have marriage counseling or whatever it is, get that education so that way you know where, if this is going to be the end-all be-all, I already know what moves I'm going to make. And it's like playing chess. You have to kind of know your steps before you make those steps. So,
Terrell, I got married the year you were born.
are you serious? 1988 is when I was born.
And I'm still hiding the receipts, so you can't return me. So, and you never give up. You never give up. So.
hang on to those.
So I haven't been married yet. I'm 36. He's been married for 36 years. So I think I'm gonna take some advice from.
I mean, you don't have to look at me. All right. I mean,
You're the one that keeps bringing it up.
Hold on, come on. Wait, Jeff, how many kids do you have?
3.
he's close.
You have 4. So
yeah, see, now this is important.
we have a. I think you need to start taking some advice from Jeff.
I'm going to borrow my final thought from Jeff. Something that you brought up is make sure you are doing everything right the first time. So prenuptial agreement, postnuptial agreement, make sure that it is as airtight as possible. And that will certainly help you out long term in terms of the financial toll of a divorce or, some other
I was going to say also estate planning documents. Please make sure those are correct too, please.
Yes.
Well, I'm just going to sort of repeat what I said earlier, that this is such an important part of somebody's life if they have to go through this, that if they feel that they perhaps made some mistakes going in, learn from that. Don't make those mistakes going out, and do it right. And I would say, we have a pretty big client base. I think the vast majority of our clients end up through this in better shape and happier and with a better future. Now, the statistics are that some people don't make it through it. It's a fairly high mortality rate for the population because of the stress. And I think that everything that was said here about the estate planning, the medical documents, the consent forms, take that seriously, and then do this right if you have to do it.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, thank you all for joining me today. I truly appreciate it. And we hope to see you next time for the podcast. And if you'd like to learn more about the firm, check us out at www.allfamilylaw.com. Thanks and have a great day.